What is your greatest weakness is one of the most common interview questions that you can be asked during your medical school interview. So in today's video, I'm going to go over 3 steps to answering this question effectively, give you some tips, and finally, I'll go through 2 expert responses to this question. Hi, I'm Nadine Evans, an admissions associate with BeMo Academic Consulting. Be sure to subscribe on whatever social media channel you're watching this from now so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. If you want us to help you ace your medical school interview, go to BeMoMedInterview.com to schedule your free initial consultation. So why do interviewers ask, what is your greatest weakness in the first place? Well, what is your greatest weakness and similar questions are aimed at understanding your limitations and how well you deal with struggles and failures. What interviewers want to see is your resilience, so aka the ability to adapt to stress and adversity. In medicine, not only will you confront stress and adversity directly, but you will also experience them vicariously through the lives of your patients. Resilience is the path through which you continue to think critically, make good clinical decisions, and hold real empathy for others despite exposure to mounting stress. Responding to the "what is your greatest weakness" interview question, although it can cause stress and anxiety for some, it's actually an opportunity to demonstrate character, self-awareness, and resilience. You will fail as a doctor at some point or another, so don't be fooled into thinking that medical schools want students with a track record of perfect success, because these students struggle to rebound in the face of obstacles. So how can you answer this question effectively, and which weaknesses are acceptable to discuss? First and foremost, you need to explain your weakness and you have to be honest in your answer. With that said, you need to be tactful in describing a weakness without raising any red flags. So, for example, that time that you got arrested on school property after final exams is not a good weakness narrative. The time that you earned a B+ instead of an A- because your schedule was overwhelming is a good weakness narrative because there are many lessons embedded inside. When selecting a personal characteristic as a limitation, definitely have a clear story to use to describe where this characteristic fits into your limitation portfolio. In general, when choosing a narrative that you'd like to discuss, try to stick with these general rules. So first, if you're picking an experience to explain your weakness, make sure that it's far enough back that you can reflect on this experience with maturity moving forward. Second, pick a weakness that you've been able to remedy or improve upon. Third, don't pick a weakness that isn't really a weakness, such as working too hard, as this will only come across as ingenuine and it won't show your ability to recognize your true weaknesses and improve upon them. Fourth, don't pick a weakness that reflects immoral or ethically questionable decision-making tendencies. And finally, taking the points that I mentioned into account, a good narrative to choose is one which you generally felt you could have performed better or were somewhat disappointed in your performance. Next, you want to focus on what you learned from this weakness. Whether you like it or not, you're not perfect, neither am I, and neither are the interviewers, neither is anyone. We've all had weaknesses and we've all failed, which is an integral component of success. If you're going to succeed, you're going to fail somewhere along the road to that success. So again, being honest about such limitations is fine, as long as you go on to demonstrate what you learned, how you've grown, and why you're a better person today for having experienced them. In general, what is your greatest weakness is asked to see if you are a self-reflective individual who is constantly growing from your experiences with ambition to continually push yourself to the next level. You should always have room to grow and show your interviewers that you are truly devoted to lifelong learning, to constant growth and refinement, which is paramount if you're going to be considered a mature professional. When discussing what you have learned, it's fine to discuss mitigating factors such as stress or personal circumstances, but just be sure that you take responsibility for them and that you're not making excuses. Lastly, apply all of this to your future career. So you need to demonstrate not only such self-knowledge, but the ways in which such knowledge is applicable in the field in which you're applying. Learning lessons from the past is great, but if you don't know how to apply these lessons or can't see their relevance in the context of where you want to go, then they aren't particularly effective. Try to remember that the nature of professional school evaluation and grading often involves significant self-reflection and accountability. You will be asked to evaluate your own performance and take initiative at looking to improve. So showing the ability to learn demonstrates that you can do this in the future. So now I want to go through our expert response to answering what is your greatest weakness. So keep in mind that sometimes this question is packaged slightly differently, and instead of being asked as what is your greatest weakness, you could be asked what is your greatest limitation? What is something that you're not good at? What is something that you have a hard time doing? What is something that you struggle with? Either way, your approach in answering these questions will be the same. 3 steps. Number 1, explain the limitation honestly and provide a specific example to support your response. Number 2, discuss the things that you have done or are doing to improve this weakness or limitation. Number 3, discuss what you have learned from this weakness or limitation and how it will benefit you in your future career. So let me go through each step with our sample response. One thing I've really struggled with is stretching myself too thin. I often want to do everything I can to help the people in my life. However, I've started to realize that sometimes doing so much for others can leave me stretched too thin. For example, last summer I was taking 2 college prep courses, working a near full-time job, 35 hours per week, volunteering as a tutor for 10 hours per week, working on a community garden plot in my neighborhood, and playing volleyball with a close team that I've played with for several years. Looking back, it's so clear to me now that this was way too much to try to take on, but at the time, I thought I'd be able to manage it. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before my grades started to slip. I was running late to work or volleyball practice on a semi-regular basis, and some days I was just too tired to put in my best effort in the garden or with my volleyball team. As well, I was personally not feeling very well, both physically and mentally, as the one thing that was consistently sacrificed was my own self-care. Okay, now let's move on to step 2 of our response. So go on to discuss ways in which you have worked or are working on improving it. One day, a few of my coworkers approached me, concerned about my well-being and performance at work. A few days later, 2 of my teammates said something similar. It was then that I realized that in not taking care of myself and my own needs, both personal and academic, I was also unable to put in 100% for my team, my coworkers, my students, or my fellow volunteers. I knew I needed to make some changes, so I met with my coworkers to see if I could shave off a few hours here and there each week without causing them any undue stress. I spoke with my course instructors to explain the gaps in my performance, and they kindly allowed me to submit some extra credit work. As well, I started holding tutoring sessions at my house rather than traveling to students' houses, as this saved me a lot of time and effort from commuting. These small changes added up to a significant amount of relief. I was able to fulfill the rest of my commitments that summer, and I pulled my grades back up after getting high scores on the remaining work and completing the extra credit assignments. Needless to say, this was a huge wake-up call. I felt awful letting my team, students, teachers, and coworkers down, and I was so thankful for the interventions that led me to restructure my time. I hadn't yet realized the impact that being overworked could have on the people in my life, the very people I was working so hard to help. Now I am very careful and strategic in how I manage my time, and I don't commit to anything if I don't know that I won't be able to give it 100% of my effort at all times. And finally, for step 3, which is go on to reflect on why it is so important for you to get a handle on this weakness and resolve this limitation, particularly as an aspiring doctor. So we did this by saying, burnout is incredibly and increasingly common for educational professionals. As a teacher, instructor, or professor, for example, you're constantly pulled in many different directions at once, and it's important to be able to balance doing everything you can for others while also setting boundaries to protect yourself. Burnout is not only problematic for the person experiencing it, it also directly impacts everyone who relies on that person for support and collaboration. If I'm devoting too many of my resources to others and not replenishing myself, I won't be able to continue like this and I will burn out. If I burn out, then I'm not helping anyone, myself, my family, my colleagues, my students, and so on. Setting boundaries and saying no sometimes is necessary. I can't help others if I'm not helping myself, and if I'm spreading myself too thin, then I'm not bringing 100% to the projects I do take on, which means the quality of my work overall could suffer, and I could let others down. On the other hand, if I simply set and maintain that boundary, it's likely that someone else would be able to step into that role and fulfill it 100%. So it is in my own best interest to work on this limitation, and it would be in my future students' and colleagues' best interest too. Okay, so let me give you one more example of a concise sample response to help you when you look to craft your own narrative to answer what is your greatest weakness. As an undergraduate student, I thought everything on campus looked really fun. There were so many places to volunteer, places to work, sports to do, and people to meet. Coming from a small town, I thought I needed to experience everything all at once. I was on the emergency first response team, and I ran the student government elections department, and I joined the varsity rowing team. I planned large research trips in India for my third year and was taking a full course load. In the second semester of my second year, midterm season was so overwhelming. My non-school commitments were easily 40 hours per week, and I did not have a handle on the academic material. I shifted around a bunch of non-school commitments and was able to salvage my performance on 3 of 4 midterms. However, I scored very poorly on my physics exam and ended up with a C+ grade at the end of the year. As I progressed through my undergraduate degree, this score was a blight on my records that directly reflected my poor ability to say no and to align how I was committing my time to my own personal values. It took that experience to show me that scholarship, above all else, was the reason I was in university. The rest was interesting and enriching, but it wasn't part of my purpose. Since that time, I've become much more clear on why I want to do what I do and what that means for how I spend my time. This doesn't mean that I never find myself too busy, but that there is always a coherent professional or personal meaning behind what I do. I find that when I focus on meaning, it's way easier to say no when I need to and to stay focused. Okay, so hopefully you're feeling a lot more confident in answering the common medical school interview question, what is your greatest weakness? Is there any other question that you're struggling to answer and you want me to do a video about? If so, let me know in the comments section. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And lastly, if you'd like us to help you prepare for your upcoming interview, go to BeMoMedInterview.com to schedule your free initial consultation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.